We have mapped the physical universe and sequenced the human genome, possessing more data about the world than any generation in history. Yet alongside this knowledge runs a widespread cultural anxiety, the suspicion that the more we learn about how the world works, the more we've lost the thread of why it matters. Modern life relies on a quiet settlement between disciplines. Science handles the mechanisms of the physical world, while religion and philosophy are quarantined to handle subjective meaning. The two are expected to stay in their own rooms and avoid speaking at breakfast. This arrangement offers a reasonable peace, but it demands that we permanently compartmentalize our minds. We are forced to live with knowledge in one hand and meaning in the other, unable to allow the two to touch. Vladimir Solovyov looked at this partition and saw an intellectual amputation rather than a peace treaty. He became the rare 19th-century thinker who recognized the danger of this split and set out to reverse the operation. Solovyov viewed the division between facts and meaning as a fatal wound to human consciousness. He spent his life trying to explain why the world didn't have to stay broken. He was a man of bizarre physical eccentricities. He possessed a high-pitched, helpless laugh that frightened strangers, and a compulsive habit of giving his money and winter coats to beggars until he had nothing left for himself. This chaotic, unmanaged life sat in stark contrast to his intellectual discipline. He held the entire history of philosophy in his head and provided the spiritual inspiration for the great novelist Fyodor Dostoevsky. Decoding the underlying logic of this impractical, half-starved man may be the key to understanding how our own fractured worldview can be repaired. Solovyov began as a militant materialist. As a teenager, he famously threw his religious icons out of his window, convinced that the universe was nothing more than matter in motion. He eventually abandoned materialism because it refused to answer or even allow questions about human purpose. He decided that any worldview which must declare the most important questions out of bounds is essentially a frightened one. He turned his attention to mysticism, researching divine visions with the systematic rigor of a traditional academic. He could often be found in the British Museum reading room, hunting for the hidden wisdom of the world through thousands of formal archives. While studying in that library, he experienced a sudden vision that commanded him to drop his scholarship and travel immediately to Egypt to meet the divine in person. In the desert, he was nearly murdered by Bedouins who mistook his black overcoat and top hat for a demon. He was robbed and left to freeze in the sand of a foreign country, where he claimed to see the wholeness of creation gathered into a single radiant presence. He spent the rest of his life as a highly logical mind attempting to empirically process that encounter. His work became a commentary on a vision he believed was as objective as any physical fact. Solovyov's central conviction was vsejedinstvo, or all unity. Everything real is secretly connected. Our divisions are wounds. Using a body as a metaphor, a severed hand is just meat. To Solovyov, a fact isolated from its meaning is exactly the same, no longer fully alive. His cure was integral knowledge. He insisted that real understanding requires empirical observation, logical deduction, and mystical intuition, all working together. This stance forced him into a war on two fronts. He attacked the tyranny of cold rationalism that ignored the spirit, while simultaneously attacking the tyranny of religious dogma that forbade the use of reason. Intellectual isolation, in his view, was a cosmic disease. He believed humanity's task was to heal the divisions between logic and spirit into a single living understanding. Solovyov's philosophy demanded action in the real world. He began a controversial campaign to heal the 1,000-year rupture between the Catholic and Orthodox churches, arguing that a divided Christianity had no business promising to heal a divided world. The institutional backlash was immediate. His own church viewed his ecumenism and his habit of trusting private visions as dangerous threats to tradition and authority. The ultimate test of his principles arrived in 1881, when a revolutionary's bomb killed Tsar Alexander II in the street. While a reeling nation expected swift executions for the captured assassins, Solovyov used a public lecture to demand something the world had never seen. He called for the new Tsar to pardon his father's murderers. He argued that if Russia truly believed the gospel it professed, it would answer blood with mercy rather than vengeance. The gesture failed entirely. The assassins were executed, and Solovyov was permanently banned from public speaking, sacrificing his career to voice a truth that the practical world could not accommodate. For the last 20 years of his life, Solovyov had no permanent home. He lived as a perpetual guest in friends' apartments and hotels, moving his manuscripts from one borrowed bed to the next. During these wandering years, he wrote the most profound treatise on love in the Russian language. He argued that romantic love is the one experience where we genuinely overcome our own ego to affirm that another person is as real as we are. There was a tragic irony to his personal life. He remained the lover who theorized love, failing to secure a single lasting romantic relationship. His wandering was the literal enactment of his philosophy. He declined to live as though the separate, property-owning self was the basic unit of reality, choosing instead a life without anchors or walls. Solovyov died at 47, physically exhausted and having failed in nearly every one of his grandest schemes. The churches remained divided, the empire ignored his advice, and his mystical visions remained alone. Despite those failures, his predictions aged with uncomfortable accuracy. He saw the partition between knowledge and meaning going up, and described exactly what life would feel like on the far side of it. He remains the conscience of modern thought, the dinner guest who refuses to change the subject. He drags us back to the question of whether a human being can be whole in a world carved into specialties. Carrying the total truth nearly crushed him, yet his refusal to set it down remains a provocation for anyone who suspects knowledge without meaning is a poor way to spend a mind.